Think about your job for a moment, not the title written on a resume, not the description posted online, but the actual actions you perform every day, the decisions, the routines, the moments where you pause and think, the moments where you improvise. Now ask yourself a quiet question. What part of this work could a machine already do today? And what part feels deeply human? This question alone begins to dissolve a fear that has been growing everywhere, the fear that jobs are disappearing. But what if the real story is not about disappearance at all? What if it is about transformation, so deep that it feels like loss, even when it is actually evolution? Every major technological shift in history arrived with the same anxiety. When machines entered factories, people feared the end of craftsmanship. When computers entered offices, people feared the end of clerical work. When the internet entered homes, people feared the end of local businesses and human connection. Yet somehow, work did not vanish. It mutated. It reassembled itself around new tools, new needs, and new forms of value. So why does this moment feel different? Why does the rise of artificial intelligence feel less like a tool and more like a replacement? And more importantly, what are we missing when we frame the future of work as a simple competition between humans and machines? The uncomfortable truth is that many jobs were never really about creativity or judgment to begin with. They were about repetition, predictability, and compliance with systems that demanded consistency. These roles existed because humans were once the cheapest flexible machines available. But now that machines can handle repetition with perfect patience, the illusion breaks. It feels personal, almost like a rejection, but it is not. It is a signal that work is being redefined at a deeper level. So the real question becomes, what is work actually for in a world where efficiency is no longer the main bottleneck? Look closely at how intelligence works. Whether human or artificial, intelligence is not just about producing answers. It is about navigating uncertainty, interpreting context, and deciding what matters. Machines are becoming extraordinarily good at pattern recognition, at scanning oceans of data and finding correlations we would never notice. But they do not wake up wondering why something matters. They do not feel the weight of responsibility. They do not experience meaning. And meaning, quietly and persistently, is becoming the core of human work. Could it be that as machines take over tasks, humans are being pushed toward roles that require judgment, empathy, and ethical reasoning rather than speed? Consider how a doctor's job is changing. Diagnosis used to rely heavily on memorization and experience, on recognizing symptoms and matching them to known diseases. Now machines can scan millions of medical records and detect patterns that surpass any individual's memory. Does this make doctors obsolete? Or does it free them from being walking encyclopedias and allow them to focus on interpretation, trust, and human connection? When a patient hears life-altering news, the most advanced algorithm cannot replace the presence of another human being who understands fear, uncertainty, and hope. So is the job disappearing, or is it becoming more human? The same pattern appears in education. Information is no longer scarce. Anyone with a device can access more knowledge than entire libraries once held. So what is the role of a teacher now? It is no longer to simply deliver facts. It is to guide curiosity, to help students think, to teach them how to ask better questions rather than memorize answers. In this sense, teaching is not shrinking, it is deepening. But this deeper role is harder to define, harder to measure, and harder to automate. And perhaps that is why it feels unsettling. We are moving away from clear checklists and toward fluid, adaptive work that cannot be easily standardized. This shift reveals something profound about how society has valued labor. For a long time, work was measured by output, by how much could be produced in a given amount of time. But machines have exposed the limits of that model. When output can be scaled infinitely by automation, human value must come from something else. Creativity, sense-making, emotional intelligence, and ethical judgment suddenly become central rather than optional. But were we ever trained for this kind of work, or were we trained to follow instructions efficiently? And if our education systems were built for a different era, how do we adapt without feeling left behind? The fear surrounding job loss often comes from imagining a future where humans are idle while machines do everything. But history suggests something more complex. When productivity increases, society does not simply stop working. It redefines what work means. Entire industries appear that were previously unimaginable. Social media managers, app developers, data analysts, Digital designers and content creators were not traditional careers a few decades ago. They emerged because new tools created new needs. So what kinds of roles might emerge as artificial intelligence becomes more embedded in daily life? And why is it so hard for us to imagine them before they exist? Part of the difficulty lies in how the human brain predicts the future. We tend to project current trends linearly, assuming tomorrow will look like today, only faster or cheaper. But technological change is rarely linear. It is disruptive and non-linear, reshaping systems in ways that are hard to anticipate. When electricity was introduced, factories did not just replace steam engines with electric motors. They reorganized entirely, changing workflows, architecture, and labor roles. Artificial intelligence is not just another tool, it is a general-purpose technology that rewires decision-making itself. So instead of asking which jobs will vanish, perhaps the more useful question is which tasks within jobs will change, and which new responsibilities will emerge around them. Think about creativity, often considered the last safe haven of human uniqueness. Machines can now generate images, music, and text with remarkable fluency. This feels threatening, especially to artists and writers. But is creativity just about producing content, or is it about expressing perspective, intention, and lived experience? A machine can remix patterns, but it does not have a childhood, a memory of loss, or a sense of purpose. Human creativity is shaped by constraints, emotions, and social context. As machines handle the mechanical aspects of creation, humans may be pushed toward roles that involve curation, direction, and meaning-making. But are we ready to let go of the idea that value comes from manual effort rather than insight? There is also a deeper neurological dimension to this transition. The human brain evolved to solve problems in environments full of uncertainty, social complexity, and limited information. It is remarkably good at integrating intuition with logic, emotion with reasoning. Machines excel at optimization within defined parameters, but struggle with open-ended goals and ambiguous values. This suggests a future where humans and machines are not rivals, but collaborators, each amplifying the other's strengths. Yet collaboration requires trust. How do we learn to trust systems we do not fully understand, while also maintaining accountability? This question becomes especially important in fields like law, finance, and governance. Algorithms can analyze vast legal databases, predict risks, and optimize decisions, but they do not understand justice. They can detect bias statistically, but they do not feel fairness. If a system recommends denying a loan or sentencing a defendant, who is responsible? The machine that produced the recommendation, or the human who accepted it? As jobs evolve, responsibility does not disappear. It concentrates. Humans become less involved in execution and more involved in oversight. This makes work cognitively heavier, not lighter. Are we prepared for roles that demand constant ethical awareness rather than routine compliance? The transformation of work is also deeply psychological. For many people, jobs are not just sources of income, they are sources of identity. When someone asks, "What do you do?" they are really asking, "Who are you in the social system?" When roles change rapidly, identity becomes unstable. This can create anxiety, resistance, and nostalgia for a past that felt simpler. But was it actually simpler, or just more familiar? And if identity has been tied too tightly to specific tasks, what happens when those tasks evolve? One of the most overlooked aspects of this transition is learning itself. In the past, education was front-loaded. You learned a profession once and practiced it for decades. Now learning becomes continuous, adaptive, and lifelong. This is not just a practical change, it is a cognitive shift. It requires comfort with not knowing, with being a beginner repeatedly. For some, this feels exhausting. For others, it feels liberating. The future of work may favor those who see learning not as preparation for life, but as a core part of life itself. But how do societies support this mindset without leaving people behind? Economic structures will also need to adapt. If productivity increases dramatically due to automation, the traditional link between labor and income weakens. This raises questions about how value is distributed. Do we measure contribution only by hours worked, or by impact created? Do we rethink safety nets, education funding, and career transitions? These are not just technical questions, they are moral ones. Technology forces us to confront what we believe people deserve simply by virtue of being human. There is a quiet irony here. As machines become more capable, the qualities that make us human become more important, not less. Empathy, creativity, ethical reasoning, and the ability to navigate complexity are not easily automated, but they are also not easily quantified. Modern systems love metrics, dashboards, and key performance indicators. The future of work may require valuing what cannot be easily measured. How do organizations reward insight, wisdom, and judgment without reducing them to numbers that miss their essence? The idea that jobs will change completely does not mean chaos. It means reorganization. It means that many roles will become more interdisciplinary. Technical knowledge will blend with social understanding. A healthcare worker may need to understand data interpretation. An engineer may need to understand human behavior. A manager may need to understand psychology as much as spreadsheets. This blending can feel overwhelming, but it also creates richer, more meaningful work. Instead of being confined to narrow functions, people may engage with problems holistically. But does our current training encourage this? Or does it still silo knowledge into rigid categories? Another overlooked shift is the changing relationship between time and work. Automation can compress tasks that once took hours into minutes. This does not automatically lead to leisure. It often leads to higher expectations. But it also opens the possibility of redefining productivity. If results matter more than hours logged, flexibility becomes central. Remote work, asynchronous collaboration, and outcome-based evaluation are not just trends. They are responses to a world where human attention becomes more valuable than physical presence. How does this reshape daily life, family structures, and mental health? There is also a global dimension to this transformation. Work is no longer tied to location in the same way. Talent can be distributed, collaboration can cross borders instantly, and opportunities can emerge in unexpected places. This has the potential to reduce inequality, but also to intensify competition. When work becomes global, what happens to local economies and cultural identities? And how do individuals navigate a marketplace where they are compared not just to neighbors, but to the entire world? At the deepest level, the transformation of work forces us to ask what we want from the future. Do we want a world optimized purely for efficiency, or one that prioritizes human flourishing? Technology does not answer this question. It amplifies our choices. Artificial intelligence can either dehumanize work or elevate it, depending on how it is integrated. Jobs are not disappearing into nothingness. They are dissolving into new forms. The discomfort we feel is the tension between old definitions and new realities. So, when someone says your job will not disappear, but will change completely, it is not a warning. It is an invitation to rethink assumptions, to see work not as a fixed identity, but as a dynamic relationship between humans, tools, and purpose. The future of work is not something that happens to us. It is something we participate in shaping, often without realizing it. And perhaps the most important question is not what machines will do, but what we will choose to do when the mechanical parts of work are no longer our main responsibility. As the invisible structures of intelligence reshape the visible world of labor, one thing becomes clear. The future does not belong to those who compete with machines at being machines. It belongs to those who lean into being human, curious, adaptable, reflective, and willing to redefine what value truly means. And if that sounds uncertain, it is because uncertainty has always been the space where growth begins.